Good morning, good Sunday morning, beautiful morning. This is mobility challenge number 6. We're going to talk about the feet, okay? And the feet are probably some of the most underappreciated areas of our bodies, and for two reasons really. Number one, we neglect them, but number two, we don't use them the way that they've always been used. What we tend to do these days is we tend to shove them in shoes, sometimes that are too tight, sometimes that are pointed, sometimes that are elevated to the point where they're really sort of suffocated in a sense and not able to do what they were designed to do. If you imagine 100,000 years ago, the feet were used in a much different way. They were much smarter. They had to adapt to lots of different terrains, and they really were our direct contact to the earth, giving us information back quickly so that we can make adjustments to, number one, the surface that we were on, but number two, to where we were at in space. I think it helps to understand the function of the foot too. And every time our foot hits the ground, something very specific should be happening. The first thing is that the bones in the feet, when you make contact and go into a weight-bearing position, those bones really open up and spread. So all the bones here in the upper part of the foot, all the bones in the toes separate. And it does that for several reasons. Number one, it gives us a better base of support. But number two, those muscles in there are able to stretch and give us really good feedback on the surface that we're on. So those muscles are very proprioceptively rich. In other words, they provide information very quickly back to the spinal cord so we can make adjustments. One important thing that allows that to happen is the spreading of the toes. So the toes should be able to open up like so. And as those bones separate and the foot flattens, so too do those toes separate. So one thing that I like to always maintain is the ability to have space in between those toes. So this week's mobility challenge has to do with, number one, do you have the right amount of space between the toes? Now, granted, we don't operate the same way we did 100,000 years ago, but the foot hasn't really changed much. So I think it's really critical that we still maintain the innate functions of the foot, because everything that happens at the foot translates up into the body. So if the foot is not functioning properly, the ankle, the knee, the hip, even into the spine and shoulder, those things can be affected. So this week's mobility challenge is, first, can you get your hand, your fingers, in between each toe? What you might want to spend a few minutes doing is just moving the toes in and out, separating them, creating some space in between those toes, just like that. All right? And do that in between each digit. And we're going to take the pinky finger, put it inside the pinky toe or the small toe, ring finger on the next one. And this is definitely challenging for me. Middle finger, index finger. There. So you can see I have a finger between each toe. The cool thing about this is you can move that around. Ooh, that is sinister. Or you can just hold it, and eventually this will actually become quite comfortable and feel really good. At first it won't. So what I want you to do this week is this: take a picture of both sides, see if you can do it. So what I'm looking for is mostly just a picture, and I want to see each finger clearly between each toe. And if I were you, I'd hang out there for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, move it around, play around with it, and what you'll find is when you take that out, that there's such a higher level of freedom between these toes that allows that foot to really function and move the way it should, gives it some breathing space, those muscles can work the way they like to work, and everything from the foot up is going to function much more appropriately. All right, looking forward to those videos and pictures.